Hello everybody and welcome to Toi to You, Curator's Corner, episode number 8. My name's Sean Brosnan. I'm a curator here at Toi Otago Settlers Museum in Dunedin, and during this great coronavirus lockdown of 2020 I'll be making these little videos about early Dunedin history to provide some infotainment to our museum visitors who are prevented from physically visiting the museum. Now, today's episode is going to be about another building in early Dunedin that for some reason or other doesn't feature in those early sketches and drawings that we've looked at in previous episodes, even though we know exactly where it was, which was the corner of Princes and High Streets, where the Southern Cross Hotel is now. Now, it was just a humble little grass whare, so that may be one reason why it doesn't feature. Maybe our historical sketches just considered it too insignificant to include in their views. Or maybe it was the rugged terrain of early Dunedin that obscures it in behind other hillocks and so on in some of the perspectives we have. But if you look at this image, for instance, from 1853 by Thomas de Lacy, it shows very clearly the commercial inn that was the subject of episode 7, and our little whare was just in behind that, just lower down, and you can't see it, but I've arrowed it here with a question mark as to where it might have been. Similarly, this view by Charles Kettle from the bay in 1848, you can see the commercial inn, not so obvious that there's a little whare just below it, and you can't see it at all in this image of Kettle's sketch from Stafford Street in 1849. But this image, which we haven't looked at before, by Samuel Shaw from 1851, in Dr. Hocken's reproduction of it in his book in 1898, he marked up this building here as being the little whare in question, although it doesn't really give us a very good idea of what it looked like. Now, the building was constructed by James Adam, and he came out in the Philip Lang as an assisted immigrant with his wife, Margaret Milne, who wasn't so keen to come here, their 2-year-old daughter, Helen, and Margaret was also heavily pregnant with their second child. He was a carpenter. He was born in Aberdeen. He'd had a basic education there, then done an apprenticeship as a shipbuilder. Then he worked as a carpenter and building contractor right across Britain before coming home to Aberdeen, getting married to Margaret and settling down to start his family. He was only in his mid-20s. He didn't have a lot of money, but otherwise he had all the practical skills that you'd want in a pioneer colonist. But more than that, he was also a very devout Free Church man, and in his home congregation in Aberdeen he had the role of precentor, which means he was the man that led the communal singing that was such an important part of Free Church worship at the time, and it was a role that he was to play here in Dunedin at First Church as well. So James Adam had all the practical and moral attributes that they were looking for when they began to recruit settlers for Otago, the ideal in fact of what they were looking for. But it was his can-do attitude that more than anything else marked him out from his fellow colonists, as we shall see. Now, Adam and his wife and family came out as steerage class assisted immigrants on the Philip Lang, and once they got here on the 15th of April 1848, their fellow passengers who had the money to buy land before they got here had just a week to walk the ground and pick out exactly where they wanted their plots to be. And on the following Monday, the 21st of April 1848, they got to choose according to an order that had been arranged by a ballot that had happened earlier. But it's interesting that those first choices, what they didn't choose, so some of the most valuable properties later on in Dunedin, for instance this one here, the corner of Princes Street and Rattray Street where the Philip Lang house is now. Now at the time that was a little hollow, a little bog. It was crisscrossed by streams and no one wanted to bother with land like that. Nor the next block down, the corner of High and Princes Street that we're looking at today. That was covered with thick bush. That gave the canny, if cash-strapped Adam, his chance. He seized the day. He went to see Captain Cargill just a few days later and he arranged to lease that land for £4 a year. Then straight away, he employed 2 Maori to help him build a little whare in that copse of trees. So they went in there and they cut off the tops of a couple of mapo trees, cut down others, and they lined them up to be the walls of the whare. They tied them all together with wattles, using flax strips to secure them. Then he sent the Maori down to the swamp to get a whole lot of grass, I suppose it was raupo, and they tied bundles that tightly and stuffed them together to make the walls and the roof. And there, just 4 days later, he had a completed house. Now, that was way before any of the other settlers on board the Philip Lang had anywhere apart from the ship to live, even earlier than Dr. Burns, Reverend Thomas Burns, who had the prefabricated manse being put together. It was well ahead of him, and Adam was able to go down to the ship and bring his family up to a little, very humble little structure to live in. I have owned good houses since, wrote Adams in an influential memoir he wrote later about his pioneer life, but never have I been able to evoke the pleasure and happiness felt on the night my cosy hut was finished. Now Margaret, his wife, was also chuffed apparently, because heavily pregnant, she much preferred coming to a little cottage of their own, however humble it might have been, than to be in a crowded immigration barracks as her baby was nearly due. And there, almost exactly a month later, on the 28th of May 1848, Margaret Adam gave birth to a son, Alexander, there in the whare amidst the bush at the bottom of High Street. Now James Adams, go get him, seize the day sort of mentality, saw him go on to have a stellar colonial career, which we haven't really got time to expand on today. But it's his attitude more than anything else that I think is noteworthy, and that really marks him out as the ideal colonist, the perfect pioneer in early Otago. Here's what he had to say about it in his own words in that memoir 25 years later. The romance of immigrant life in its first stages was to me so enviable that if need be, I would not hesitate for a moment to pass through all the phases of pioneer life again, which in my case was full of hard work, pleasure, profit, and healthful exercise. So I hope you enjoyed that story, and if you did, you might like to subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon so that you get notified of future episodes, and there will be some of those as we continue in lockdown for a little bit longer. So until next time, bye for now.